Welcome back to the Secret Life of Parkinson's. I'm Jessica Krauser, and I'm joined by Brian Baker.
As always.
And we have a guest with us today, Carrie Boorse. Hi, Carrie.
Hello. Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
So just a quick background on Carrie. So Carrie and I are friends. She is a young onset Parkinson's patient. We met back in, I think it was just May of this year, so May of 2022.
Yeah.
And
Sounds about right.
you're newly diagnosed, right? As of November?
Yes. Yes, I was diagnosed in October of 21.
Okay, perfect. So after a lot of, what's it called? Posts that were made from like Michael J. Fox Foundation, after the 5K that we hosted last year, I had a few young onset women reach out to me, and one of which was a friend of Carrie's.
Yes.
They actually just met each other randomly as well. So we now have a little network of young onset women that are about like 10 or 11 of us that we started to create ever since April of this year. And Carrie and I have had many conversations since then, just about everything that she's learned in her diagnosis along the way. So first, Carrie, welcome. Thank you for joining us from Philadelphia.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Yes.
So give us a quick background of your story, like your diagnosis journey.
Yeah, so my daughter doesn't really like me to talk about it, but it's part of my story as well. But in June of 2020, who was then 14, was diagnosed with cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went through 6 months of her having chemo. And it was during that time that I started to notice that just wasn't moving as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I was having a lot of pain in my shoulder. But, obviously she was my number one priority, and I just brushed it off, didn't think anything of it. I was working and taking care of her at the same time. I have 2 other children as well. And so while I was working, I would notice little things like I couldn't use my mouse as well with my right hand. It felt like it was harder to type, like there was something wrong with the keyboard, like it was sticking. And I kept kind of thinking like, this is weird, but just blew it off. I was having shoulder pain, really thought it was driven by that. So I should say that she's fine now. But once we got through the chemo and she was off treatment, I just thought, okay, now it's time to take care of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I think I started to think about things more and kind of like reflect on things more. And one of the things I couldn't do, this was probably the first thing that kind of like caught my attention, was when I was trying to slip on my flip-flop on my right foot.
Yeah.
I couldn't put it on. And I was like, okay, now this is weird. It's not just my right hand and my right shoulder. It's my right foot also.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to the doctor, and the doctor was pretty adamant that everything was fine and that I had just experienced a stressful, traumatic, experience in my life, and that it was probably driven by that. But I just didn't feel comfortable with that. And I kept kind of pushing, and I tried to get in with neurologists. And as I think most people know, it's very difficult to even just see a regular neurologist.
Right.
They'll schedule you 6 months out. So by the time I saw a neurologist, I felt like I was going crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw her, and within 10 minutes, she said it's Parkinson's.
Oh, wow, that quickly.
So for me, I know some people are like, oh, it all made sense. Like, it all came together. But for me, it was really still a bit of a shocker. Like, I thought that there was something neurological going on,
Mm-hmm.
but, I had even said to a couple of doctors, like, do you think it could be Parkinson's? And they were like, no, I don't think it's Parkinson's.
Really?
And so when they said it, when she said it was Parkinson's, it was definitely like, oh, okay, well, I wasn't expecting that.
So was this a neurologist or a movement disorder specialist?
It was a neurologist. And
Okay.
so my husband honestly was like, she's wrong. And I started like doing more of a deep dive. I reached out to a young onset organization,
Mm-hmm.
started talking to a couple of the people within that organization. And like, I kept saying, no, I think she's right. And I need to see a movement specialist. And so at that point, I scheduled an appointment with a movement specialist. I mean, I should actually even say that I went to another neurologist and he said it was not Parkinson's.
Oh.
And I was like, oh.
So you went to two neurologists. One said, they both said different things, and then you went to movement disorder specialist.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of how it all came about. I mean, I think probably what happened for me that maybe other people didn't experience is I had like this really acute or, defined time period in my life that was like extreme stress. And I think it just progressed the disease so quickly that it was very quickly that I noticed it. It wasn't like, now I can think back to like, oh, years ago, well, maybe now that I do think about it, like maybe this was happening or that was happening, but I don't think my initial progression, I think was really kind of rapid, and now has subsided since that stress has been alleviated.
That's good.
Yeah, they've said, I remember when I got diagnosed, they asked the question, have you had any kind of major life
traumatic
have you been in a car accident, anything happened, so that very well may have been what brought it out in you.
Yeah, or at least brought it out faster, something that was going to happen.
I've been told now by both the movement specialists and the neurologist that it's not atypical. Like that does happen. There's a death in the family or there's something traumatic and it could cause the symptoms to accelerate, and that's when you notice it. So yeah, I mean, I do think that that's exactly what happened.
So one of the things that why I love having conversations with you so often is because you're newly diagnosed and just because of your nature, you do, I think it's a lot of research. You said it's not a lot, but you do a lot of research because initially you were not interested in taking medication. So can you tell me a little bit about
you're right.
why you didn't want to take medication and what you started looking into?
I don't know if I have a clear answer as to why, other than I just have never really taken a lot of medication, which is kind of funny because I do work in the pharmaceutical industry, but I've just never really taken medication. I try to stay away from even like Tylenol, Advil, things like that. So I think it was just kind of against my nature to take medication on a regular basis. And so I really initially thought there's got to be something else. Like there's got to be some other way. And so I think I do think it is my nature to kind of like research, Google, collect as much knowledge as I can because I like information. I work with data and I like data. I like information. And so initially kind of my initial path was like just kind of Googling like alternative paths for Parkinson's. And I came across two books right away that I read. One was by John Pepper, which I think a lot of people probably have seen, which is like reversing reversing Parkinson's or something like that. And then another, I can't think of the name right now of the author, but he also took like a more natural approach. But they both started talking about exercising a lot and, being like aggressively exercising and doing things that would raise your heart rate and things like that, which I actually had already been doing for a long time, for years. And so that was not a big stretch for me. It was just more I did focus in on it more. I had already been doing that.
Did you change anything about your workout routine or you kept it the same?
I don't. I mean, I really did keep the same workout routine that I had. I do a cross box where I'm lifting weights and boxing. And then I also do something that we call like fit camp, but it's like a boot camp, which is typical of what I have been doing. And then at one point I did Orange Theory for years. I did Orange Theory. So both those classes are not like that different than Orange Theory. There was a period of time that I, ran, did a half marathon, things like that. So the exercise wasn't a stretch, but I really thought I'm not taking medication. I don't want to take medication. But as I continued to do my research and I didn't, my resources were like the internet, like it wasn't.
Was that scary?
Atypical, I stumbled upon a video that someone gave to me by Dr. Mishley, who is out of Seattle. And I just became completely focused on her style and her approach. I think it's because she's not necessarily, she's a naturopathic doctor, but she does promote medications. So I think that spoke to me, but then she also does a lot of research and uses data, and I love data. So
is that the one that she
and
doesn't?
since-
Sorry, she doesn't. Is that the doctor out of Seattle that doesn't believe that tells you to stay off dairy? Is that part of her?
yes,
Okay.
yes,
Yeah,
that's her. Yeah. So she takes like there's multiple approaches she takes. One is like
Yeah.
definitely a diet that she recommends.
The diet
And I
that
don't
we
know
haven't
if she
done.
recommends it.
Yeah.
If you ask her, she might say the data recommends it. Like it's data driven. But when she talks about supplements, she does also give her patients carbidopa, levodopa, which is probably the first time I was like, okay, maybe I'll try it then.
Because
I felt really comfortable with her approach.
So you are taking that now.
I am. So it took me a while, and it was for multiple reasons. Some of it was because I really didn't want to take medication. But some of it was, like I said, initially my husband was like, that diagnosis is not right. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't feel comfortable taking medication that the first neurologist prescribed. And I didn't really connect with her, and I didn't feel comfortable in some of the things that she said. So I just didn't feel like she had the knowledge base about Parkinson's that I was looking for in a physician. So I didn't take the medication she prescribed. I just kind of threw it away. And and then I thought I would see the second neurologist and I would like him and he would give me something. And then he said, no, you don't have Parkinson's. So he didn't prescribe anything. So it wasn't until I saw the movement specialist, which again, takes months. At that point, I was like, okay, I'm having a hard time typing. I'm having a hard time boxing, which I know sounds silly, but I want to be able to box,
because you feel
my right
weak
hook
in that.
Was really stiff. Yeah. And so that was when I decided it was time to start taking medicine.
But go ahead.
So do you have more tremors or do you have more just rigid, stiff movements?
Initially, I didn't have a lot of tremors, but I would say that that's probably the one thing that has progressed over the last years. I have more of a tremor than I used to. So even now I can feel like my hand shaking, but I do have like rigidity. I would say rigidity. And I think that's what caused like my right hook not be able to do that right hook when boxing. I think that's probably what caused some of the shoulder pain that I initially experienced. Right. And like my foot definitely doesn't move a lot, my right foot. So I think that's probably my biggest symptom is rigidity. But
you're still taking a very light dose of carbidopa levodopa, right?
I am. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a light dose. I take a half of, like one pill is the 25 over 100 of carbidopa levodopa, and I take a half a pill 3 times a day. I've experimented with taking a full pill, like if I'm going to the gym, or just to see how I feel. And honestly, I feel a little over medicated at a full pill. I feel like I do feel like I wiggle a little bit.
Okay.
So I feel really, I can't, it's almost crazy to say this. And I know you said this, Jessica, but I feel like almost back to normal on 3 half doses. I still experience the tremor. I would say that's the one thing that the medication doesn't seem to be completely eradicating. But it's definitely less. My husband has said that he notices it less.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you feel good. Do you feel okay? Like, again, you said in the beginning, you would never even take Tylenol and Advil. Do you feel okay taking this type of medication? No. But you do it because you feel better?
I mean, I feel better. I have like this very still, like I really don't like taking it. I don't want to take it. I don't like to take it. I do because I feel better, but it's a struggle. It's like an internal struggle. I feel like taking this medication.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't want to say speak for everybody. I think I went through the same thing.
I did not want to take it, but I did not want to take that medication because I read about and talked to my doctor that especially in young women, it can make you more dyskinetic. And I know with some of or at least just with one of our friends in the group, it did make her more dyskinetic, but I think hers is getting better. But my biggest take on it, which I think I told you and a few of the other members of our little group, is even if you are skeptical or afraid of it, if your doctor prescribes it, ask, if I try it for a couple months and I don't want it or don't like it, don't want to take it, you can get back off. It's the whole, and that's where I don't know, again, it sounds like something so dumb. Like, of course, if you get on a medication, you can get off of it. But I don't know why I didn't think that way. So I stretched mine and I took a dopamine agonist instead for the first 2 years. Whereas now I look back on it, I'm like, I wish I wasn't so afraid of carbidopa, levodopa, but everything out there makes you feel afraid of it, or you think that your body's going to be immune to it. And that's not the case, because you just progressively get worse and you just need more over time. That's all.
And I would say it was the opposite. I was really nervous about the agonists. And so that was what was initially prescribed to me.
I wish I was nervous about the agonists.
I was so nervous.
Yeah, it works for some people, but after a while,
I have heard that.
Yeah.
You got the Mirapex and the
Mirapex, Ropinirol,
those
things. It's after you take so many of them, you just have to be careful of the side effects, like anything. So last question that I have is, what have you learned? Because again, you haven't been diagnosed for that long. You've had it for longer. But what have you learned about Parkinson's that you wish you knew in the beginning of your diagnosis?
Well, I've heard you say this, and the one thing that really kind of resonates with me is when I was diagnosed, I really thought like within a year I was going to be completely immobile. Like I really thought like this is going to happen very quickly. I didn't realize that, I think the general understanding is that we've all had it for like a number of years before we're diagnosed, right? So I didn't know any of that initially. So I think like right away I was like, oh my God, by next year I'm going to be like immobile. I'm going to be I'm going to be useless. And so I think I wish I had known that it was like more slow progressing, that there are things you can do to help the progression, that you have control of your life still.
Yeah, I think that's actually great how you just said that. You have control over your life. It did not take over.
It's not a roadblock.
It's not a roadblock. It's a detour.
No. And Brian, your DBS, I'm so excited about it, that you're doing well. I'm like, okay, that's a good positive thing for me in the future to consider.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the one thing about that, I'm glad I had it done sooner than later.
You were ready though. It was a point.
I was on a lot more medication than what you're on currently. So
we definitely have time, but it's like, Carrie, to your point, it's something that we can look forward to. That is available.
Not be scared of.
Said, just having that 2-week period where life was normal again was like so exciting.
Yeah, that you'll get back there. Well, Carrie, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I like to leave everybody with Brian's favorite, which is I call our last 30 seconds. But in our last 30 seconds, I'll leave you all with this. Like Carrie mentioned, there is things that a lot of people can be scared of, but having medication, having exercise, having doctors in your corner, you just need to do the research on your own. Every patient is different. Every doctor is different. So make sure you do your research. Make sure you talk to your doctor before you make any changes or add anything into your diet, exercise, or medication routine. And we'll see you all again next time. Thank you so much. Thank you so much,
Carrie.
for coming on, Carrie.
No problem. Thank you.